Hi, it's Penny here. So today I'm going to be talking about all the graphic novels that I read in the month of September. I did read 15 graphic novels slash comic slash manga type things, although some of them were from the same series. And as usual, I'm going to do this book battle style where I pair up all the books and I battle them against each other until we come up with the best book of the month. Also, last week I did my main book battle for all the novels I read in September. So at the end we'll battle the winner of the graphic novels against the winner of the novels. But anyway, let's get into it. Our first battle is going to be my most full story graphic things that I read in the month. So we've got Squire by Sara Alfageeh and Nadia Shammas up against The Highest House by Mike Carey and Peter Gross. So firstly, let's talk about Squire. This follows a young person as they try to find a better future for their family that's kind of struggling, but also there's quite a lot of prejudice against them because people feel like they are very privileged, even though they're not, and kind of think that they're hoarding wealth. So then this young person decides to join the army. They're kind of dreaming of glory and they're sold that it's all about honor and heroism. But really this army is like an army of the colonizers of this world. And so while there's a lot of talk about bringing everyone together, you can also see there are kind of cracks in that story. And we basically follow this group of young people as they go through this training and learn to become squires. I think with the eventual goal of becoming knights. I've read this near the beginning of the month, so I've kind of forgotten. I will say I think this is targeted maybe at a more younger audience. For me, kind of the messaging of it, that maybe these battles aren't all they cracked up to be, was fairly simplistic, and I was quite frustrated about it right from the beginning. I think as well, normally I like the art of the graphic things I read to be really bright and like quite defined lines, whereas this was not really that, even though it still probably is quite well illustrated. But I do think the eventual kind of message that came together and the way that these young people work together was quite heartwarming, but it goes through some quite frustrating parts before it gets there. But again, for a younger audience, I think it would be good. Then we have The Highest House by Mike Carey, who I didn't realize is M.R. Carey, and I've read several books by M.R. Carey that I've really loved and have been meaning to read more of his stuff. So excited that I managed to do that by accident. The saddest thing about The Highest House is I have realized this is not a complete series. At the end, it kind of says end of part 1, but there's also nothing online about the possibility of there ever being more. It seems like Mike Carey has even said it's unlikely he would write something of that style again. So who knows? But I do still think the story in this first part is worth it. Actually, I would say that this was the most fully fleshed fantasy story that I've ever read in graphic form, and I would love to find more things like this if you have any recommendations. So we're following this young boy who gets sold into slavery and becomes a roofing apprentice, but also he ends up kind of meeting this creature that lives under the castle and making a bit of a deal with it. And then through both that deal and also just the way that he is, he's able to change his circumstances and maybe the circumstances of others. I really like the way, like, even when we're just getting this young slave boy's experience, there's bits of dialogue kind of in the background where you can see the bigger political world and what's going on with that. And I did find the ending fairly satisfactory, even though it's kind of an ending of one story that wasn't introduced right from the beginning, and the part about kind of the magic and the bigger world and this creature under the castle, that's the part that wasn't continued, even though that is the most interesting part. So I think I'm really going to be hoping we get some more one day. I will say as well, this wasn't, again, the bright art that I tend to prefer, but I think it did really suit the story. And this one did take me a while to get through, but I found that I just kind of wanted to work through it slowly as the world was built and kind of everything unfolded. So this is definitely one I recommend, and actually, like, I only picked this purely based on the cover in my library app, so that was a nice fluke. So if I'm putting these two up against each other, I think you can tell I'm going to pick Highest House just because for me, I felt like the story and the world was so much more fully fleshed. Although Squire wasn't too bad. There was definitely like a lot of complexity to the world, but Highest House also had that magical component, whereas Squire doesn't really have much fantasy magic stuff, and I'm a fantasy girl, so we're going to pick The Highest House as the winner of the battle. Okay, next we've got our mythological creature battle. So we've got The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle and adapted by Peter B. Gillis up against The Mermaid in the Shoe by K.G. Campbell. So firstly, The Last Unicorn. This is a book that I've read previously and really loved, but also when I was very young I watched the movie and I absolutely love the movie. It's one of those like formative movies that really affected me when I was young. It's just such a beautiful movie. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend it. And in the beginning I thought that this graphic novel adaptation was also going to be amazing because the art style was very similar and it seemed to be like pretty much a direct retelling of the movie, because interestingly, like, I've watched the movie and read the book and they're very similar in tone, but there are some differences in the book. But because I watched the movie first, I always kind of think of the movie as the original source material. It's not true, but I do still feel like the graphic novel was closer to the movie, which again might make you think, oh, I would really like it. But as we got further through, I felt like it wasn't hitting the plot points as well as the movie did. Like, it wasn't getting across the emotional feeling of it, or even like the eccentric nature of it. And I ended up kind of just skimming it because I was really disappointed. So I think I'm going to go and just rewatch the movie to get my nostalgia instead. Then we have The Mermaid in the Shoe. So this is just a really short little children's book about this mermaid. All her sisters have really amazing skills, but her dad is still really proud of her even though she doesn't have any apparent skills and her sisters all kind of think she's useless, but she does have a lot of curiosity. And then she finds a shoe and she decides to go and try and find out what this shoe is. There is a part later in the book where she does come across a human, and the description of the human from like a mermaid perspective was just amazing. Like, it was such an adorable book with such a great message and I really loved it. So again, obviously, I think if we're putting these two books up against each other, I'm going to pick The Mermaid and the Shoe just because it was adorable. Okay, then for our next battle, we have the second and third volumes of The Promised Neverland by Kaiu, Shirai and Posuka Demizu up against Zodiac Starforce Volume 1 by The Power of Astra. So firstly, The Promised Neverland. This is volume 1, but I read volumes 2 and 3 during the month of September. And basically, in the first volume, we discover some things going on in this orphanage with these children that make them decide that they need to leave the orphanage or escape the orphanage. And it's very logic heavy, a little bit like Death Note, where all the characters are trying to outplay each other and outwit each other. And I really like that. The only thing I will say is end of volume 3 and we still have not got anywhere near escaping the orphanage, and I'm a little bit worried because my brother told me the other day that from his memory most of the story is set at the orphanage, and this is a 20 volume series, so I'm not sure because I really want to know about what's going on outside the orphanage. There's a few clues about it in the first volume, but we haven't really gotten more of that, even though like that's such an interesting concept, but I don't want to spoil what that is for you if you're going to read this. But I think if you like Death Note and that whole logical play-by-play kind of story, then you would really like this. Basically at this orphanage they've got a really strict structure. They all have to wear white, and every day they do these tests where they get a ranking, and when you're 12 you get adopted, or if you're doing really badly in the test you also get adopted early. As well, they all have like numbers tattooed on their necks, so there's a few like hints of something going on, and then they discover more about what's going on. Some of the orphans are super cute and there are some really cute moments, but also some quite twisted moments, so it's quite nice how all of that comes together. But honestly, if we don't get out of the orphanage in the next couple of volumes, I'm going to start to doubt whether I should continue this series or not. I don't know. If you've read this, let me know. How long am I going to be waiting to get out of the orphanage? Then next we have Zodiac Starforce. So this, I was super confused by it because it says volume 1, but once I started reading it, it feels like it comes in the middle of the story because these girls in this Zodiac Starforce already know about their powers, but now they've kind of decided to finish fighting evil, and there's a few members kind of trying to get them back into it, and there's something that happens that kind of triggers things as well. But because it feels like an established friend group with like an established story, I was like, is there another book or another something that I'm supposed to read first? But there isn't. That's just the way the story's been written, and I didn't like it. I felt like it made it really hard to get to know the characters, and I think as well because I don't know the zodiac symbols, I found it really hard to keep in my head which one of them were each zodiac. And also, why is there not a character for every aspect of the Zodiac. There's only like 5 girls. I don't know, it didn't seem right to me, and the story, I just found it kind of boring. There's like a girl who's been influenced by this darker demon thing from another dimension, and they're trying to decide whether they should do something about it. She's kind of trying to hide her problems, but most of it was just kind of like teen angst stuff without much of a plot, and I was just so bored. I skimmed through most of the end, and I definitely have no interest in continuing on to volume 2. So if we're going to put these two up against each other, I'm definitely going to pick The Promised Neverland. Okay, then for our last battle, I read 4 volumes of each of these series. So we have Cucumber Quest by Gigi up against I Hate Fairyland by Skottie Young. So Cucumber Quest, this is another one where I entirely picked it from my library app based on the beautiful cover. Like, these rabbits are just so cute. And this volume 1, I loved it. 5 stars. Maybe the best graphic novel I've ever read, but it could also be that it was just the kind of light-hearted humor that I needed in the moment that I picked it up. Basically, we have this rabbit boy called Cucumber. He wants to go to magic school and learn magic, but then his dad turns up and is like, no, you need to go on a quest to save the world. And he's like, well, couldn't my sister go? Because she really likes being a hero, and I just want to go and learn magic to make the world a better place. And the dad's kind of weird about it. And even a bit later, when there's an obvious opportunity to like avoid the whole quest, his dad's like, no, you can't do that. And just like throughout it, the humor in this first volume had me laughing so much. As well, like the art is adorable, but also at times like really epic. I think this is not exactly my favorite art style, but I do really like the color scheme and the cuteness of the characters, and just like the main strength I think of this series is the characters. I grew to love them so much, and often at the back of each book there's a little section, firstly with like stats of the different characters and their strengths and weaknesses and like their inventory and stuff, and then as well like little Q&A sections where it's like fan questions to the characters, and the answers are hilarious. So the characters are amazing. The humor in this first one is amazing. The only downside is, so in this first book it kind of sets up the idea that they're going to go to each of these different kingdoms to collect something to save the world, and I didn't find the stories in the other kingdoms as good. The plot seems to get a little bit jumpy as we continue on, and like the humor wasn't as hilarious, but there are still some interesting elements to the plot, like especially there's kind of some interplay between the different bad guys that I think is really interesting. And the saddest bit about this is that the first 4 volumes have been released, but then at first I thought that was it and it had just never been finished. However, I found out you can continue it online. Unfortunately, the last volume, or what would have been the last volume, has only been done as an illustrated script, but what would have been the 5th volume is online just like as a webcomic, because I think this was originally released as a webcomic. So you can actually go and read all of this online for free, and like the first volume was so amazing that I think you should. I'm saying that, but I'm also knowing that after I read this, I went online and I saw a lot of my friends had not given this 5 stars, and I don't know how you could not give this 5 stars. It was like one of the most adorable things I've ever read. Then we have I Hate Fairyland by Skottie Young. This was a reread for me, or at least I thought it was, for the first 4 volumes. But when I got to the end of volume 3 and picked up volume 4, what I remembered is that originally when I got these from the library, my library said that it had volume 4, but it actually just had like edition 4, which is not the same thing. And so I only ever read the first 3 volumes, and volume 4 was brand new for me. Also, what I found on a reread is that these didn't really give me that reread feeling, because I knew what was going to happen. I knew the vibe of things. I was a little bit bored on my reread, but volume 4, I did find it refreshing again. Maybe I didn't love it as much as I loved I Hate Fairyland the first time I read it, but I did still like it. And there has just recently been a volume 5 release, which I will read very soon. So what is I Hate Fairyland about? Basically, this young girl is just hanging out, and then she gets pulled through a portal into Fairyland. It's a very traumatic experience for her, and when she gets there, they say, right, now you need to go and find the key. It should be super easy, and then you can go back to her world. However, 27 years later, she is still stuck in Fairyland, and she is pissed. She is just like destroying everything. She can't die because of the magic of Fairyland, and she's just like, there's so much violence throughout this. It is also like that art style that I really like, with the bright colors and the strong lines, and just like all the fairy tale elements are really amazing, but also then the violence that gets added on top is such a nice contrast. If you haven't read the series, I would definitely recommend it, but if you've read it before, like, it didn't quite hold up on a reread for me, and I think it's just because there's a lot of writing in some of it, and if you already know what's going to happen, I think I was just too lazy to read it all, so it felt tiring a little bit, and like some of the big shocks that I got on the first read weren't shocking for me on a second read. But I'm pretty sure that first read would still be something really enjoyable for anyone who likes a bit of violence and a bit of cute stuck together. So if I'm going to put these two series up against each other, I am actually going to pick Cucumber Quest because, like, it was adorable. Okay, now before we pick the best graphic novel of the month, let's do a couple of semi-final battles. Firstly, we're going to have The Highest House by Mike Carey and Peter Gross up against The Mermaid in the Shoe by Gigi Campbell. I really liked both of these, but they are so different because The Highest House is such a full fantasy world, a full story, like fully developed characters, whereas The Mermaid in the Shoe is just like a little children's story with a little bit of cuteness and a little bit of a different perspective, a great lesson. But like The Highest House had lots of great lessons in it and told with like a lot more depth. Look, basically, if you're a little kid, read The Mermaid in the Shoe. If you've only got 5 minutes, read The Mermaid in the Shoe. But if you want a more fully fleshed fantasy novel written in graphic form, then definitely pick The Highest House, and because I'm more of the latter, I'm going to pick The Highest House as the winner of this battle. Then we've got The Promised Neverland volumes 2 and 3 by Kaiu, Shirai and Posuka Demizu up against Cucumber Quest by Gigi. And if I'm battling these two up against each other, I'm definitely going to pick Cucumber Quest, because even though I really like the logic of The Promised Neverland, I am struggling with the pacing. But Cucumber Quest, I love this first volume. I think it's perfect. Yes, the way the plot works and maybe the pacing is off on the later 3 volumes, but like, I love the characters, I love the cuteness, I love this volume so much. I'm going to pick Cucumber Quest as the winner of the battle. Okay, and then for our last graphic novel battle, we're going to have The Highest House by Mike Carey and Peter Gross up against Cucumber Quest volumes 1 to 4 by Gigi. And this is a really hard battle because I love both of these, but again, they are very different because one is so fun and cute and just all about the characters. Highest House is all about everything, like amazing world, amazing magic, amazing characters, amazing plot. You know, I gave the first volume of Cucumber Quest 5 stars, but I did give the later volumes less. I didn't give The Highest House 5 stars. I think I only gave it 4. Isn't that right? I only gave it 4 stars, but I do think maybe if we're comparing against all 4 volumes of Cucumber Quest, like maybe if it was just against volume 1 it would be different, but against all 4 volumes, I think we're going to pick The Highest House. And I really wish we were going to get some more of it. I still hope that it might happen. Then lastly, let's put The Highest House up against the winner of the novel battle, and that is The Pursuit of William Abbey by Claire North. So these two. We have The Highest House, which is like an amazing fantasy world where the slave finds a way to influence the bigger world. And then we have The Pursuit of William Abbey, which is such a weird kind of historical fiction where this man has this weird truth-seeking ability that's kind of the result of a curse. I do think the concepts of The Pursuit of William Abbey were much more like original and unique, but overall, I think the execution and just the whole thing as a whole, in terms of The Highest House, like, I think The Highest House was just a better full picture. As I said, great world building, great magic, great characters, great plot, just great. So we're going to pick The Highest House as the best book in the month of September, which I think is the second month in a row where the graphic novels that I've been reading have been better than the novels. So that's weird. Anyway, if you have read any of the books that I talked about in this video, I would love to chat with you about them down in the comments. So let me know what you thought about them. And do also subscribe if you'd like to see more bookish videos from me. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.